Welcome to my booktube.
Hey, thanks for joining me. Today I'm going to be doing a review of Scythe. I read this last month for my owls. So I will be going over spoiler-free for the first part of the video, and then I will go into spoilers a bit later on, but I'll definitely give you a heads up before we get there. Scythe is a dystopian novel that takes place in our future. Essentially, humans have conquered everything, including death. We've become basically immortal. The only problem that we're facing now is overpopulation, and so the solution that they've come up with is to have a group of people called Scythes who go around and glean everyone, which is their kind term for killing people. In the future, there's no more government. The Thunderhead takes care of everyone. It's basically an artificial intelligence. The Cloud has become the Thunderhead, and it's all of humanity's stored knowledge, and therefore there's no government anymore, no poverty, no crime, because the Thunderhead takes care of all of that. The only thing that the Thunderhead doesn't deal with is the Scythedom, because the Thunderhead stays away from both the creation and the ending of life, and it feels like that is a human problem that we as humans need to be dealing with, and so that's where the Scythedom comes in, and they determine who is killed and when they're killed and how many people. So I really enjoyed the concept of this book. I think that's what kept me going through for most of it. Not sure that the execution was quite where I wanted it to be. So Scythe is written in third person, and we follow the two main characters, Citra and Rowan, who are just two regular teenagers. Each of them encounter one of the Scythes, Scythe Faraday, when he is about to glean someone, and based on their interactions with him, he chooses them to become his next apprentices. Neither Citra or Rowan are really interested in becoming scythes, which Scythe Faraday says is one of the things that will make them a good scythe. He extends the offer for them to become his apprentices, and they end up agreeing to it, and the rest of the book is mostly about their training to become scythes, and they end up somehow being pitted against one another, and only one of them can end up surviving. We do kind of get some other perspectives of other characters. I think there is one other character who we do briefly get to read from his point of view, but we also get journal entries from a couple of the other scythes, which is really interesting. I think that was one of my favorite parts, was the journal entries. I feel like that really helped bring the world a bit more to life for me, and I think they were just my favorite parts of the story. They were the most engaging. When it comes to the characters, I feel like this was probably the weakness of the book. The characters were interesting and they were different in their perspectives, but I just felt like the development wasn't really there. I'm personally more of a character-driven reader, and so I like to get to know our characters and feel a connection with them. I just feel like most of the characters in this story were a bit more surface level. I think most of the book focused on plot and world building a bit more than it did character focus, which is fine. I'm hoping that in the second book that there will be a bit more focus on the characters so that I can feel more of that emotional intensity. It would make the stakes feel a bit higher, and I might be a bit more engaged in reading the story. So for Citra, I felt like she had a lot of potential to be an interesting character, and that's not to say that she wasn't a good character. She did have some of those classic YA female character tropes of being really stubborn, but she was a bit different in that she was a lot more thoughtful. You could tell that she's intended to be an intellectual and a more level-headed character, so I really liked that about her. The only thing is I feel like she was the least developed character out of all of them. I feel like we got a lot less of her backstory, of her family and friend dynamics, of what that looked like before she met Scythe Faraday and Rowan, and before their story all collectively continues together. So yeah, I was a little bit disappointed with Citra, not because of her as a character, but I honestly think it's mostly because of how she was written. She just didn't get as much attention, I think, to her thoughts and feelings and her personality and her life as much as Rowan did, and even Rowan didn't get much. So that's why I'm saying the characters are probably the weakest part of the story. So similar to Citra, Rowan was kind of surface level. We did get a lot more of what his life looked like before he met Scythe Faraday. Like, we know about his friend Tiger, who likes to go splatting. His friend Tiger likes to throw himself off of buildings and fall and essentially become deadish, and then be revived and see how long it takes, and if he ruined the marble floor when he landed, and like, that was pretty fun to see their dynamic and to read a bit about his friend. We get to know more about Rowan's family and his feelings towards his family. He calls himself the lettuce because he has so many siblings and so many family members that they're all like the bread, meat, and tomatoes of the family, and he feels like the lettuce kid, so like he's kind of forgotten. So you can see a bit more of his inclination towards wanting to become a Scythe and work with Scythe Faraday, more so than Citra, and especially with Rowan's situation when he first meets Scythe Faraday and he's watching this kid be gleaned, and all of the repercussions that he faces with the kids at his school after, and how he's ostracized and really left out, and even bullied. So I feel like we just got so much more with Rowan, and even as the story goes, I felt like we got more of his internal feelings. I feel like Citra was really done a disservice in comparison to Rowan in this story, so yeah. For the other characters, there's a few other Scythes that we get to know. So Scythe Faraday takes in Rowan and Citra to become his apprentices, and I really like the way that he operates and the way that he chooses how to glean people. He's a lot more statistical. He wants to keep things a lot more probable and people's deaths to be more like it would happen back in the Age of Mortality, as they called it. So he chooses people based on their statistical probability of dying during the Age of Mortality. You can see that he does have a lot of empathy around it. It's not something that he enjoys doing as well. I feel like Scythe Curie is someone else who also demonstrates a lot of empathy when it comes to her choices and how she decides who she's going to glean, and I really liked her perspective. And then of course Scythe Goddard, who we are meant to hate. He really enjoys killing people. He is the antagonist of the book, and he is awful. He has a couple followers with him, and they go and do mass killings. As much as I did like Citra and Rowan, because I didn't dislike them, but I wasn't like really rooting for them. When it comes to the atmosphere and the world building, I feel like overall it was done pretty well. I don't really have any complaints. I don't feel like there's anything about the world that I didn't understand or that I wouldn't have been able to generalize on my own. The pacing was fine. I wasn't bored at any point, but I also wasn't hanging on to every word. Like, I could put the book down and wait until I had time to pick it up again. So before we get into spoilers, I do want to say overall I did still think this was an enjoyable book. If I were to rate it, I'd probably put it at about 3.5 stars because it was good, but it wasn't awesome. I can wait until I pick up the next one. I'm hoping that in Thunderhead there's going to be a lot more character development, so hopefully that the stakes will be a lot higher for me then. I also want to know where it's gonna go. But yeah, that's all I'm gonna say before we get into the spoiler section. So if you haven't read Scythe and you want to, let me know what your expectations are. Let me know what you're excited about, what you're not excited about down below. And thanks for watching. We are about to get into spoilers now. Okay, spoiler time. I know the first complaint that I have is probably one that everyone has heard and has been talked about to death, but the romance. This was probably the worst part of the book, in my opinion. It came out of nowhere. There was no development. They didn't really interact with each other in any way that made this seem like it was a probable outcome. So it just seemed really out of nowhere for me. They didn't seem to have chemistry. I think it would have been a lot better if they had just developed like a really strong friendship or a platonic relationship or a mutual respect for one another, and I think the stakes still would have been high enough. I don't think that people have to have a romantic relationship in order for them to care about each other's lives. Like, if my best friend and I both were in this situation, I would be just as mortified at potentially losing my best friend as I would for losing my partner. I just don't think that romance was something that had to be in here. I did, however, like the cute romance between Scythe Faraday and Scythe Curie. That was sweet. I didn't have a problem with that. It was really backstory kind of stuff, so that was fine. But at least when it came to Citra and Rowan's romance, at least it was on the back burner. It was something very minor, a really small part of the story, so it wasn't anything that really detracted from the experience of the book for me. I had heard from other reviews of this book that both Citra and Rowan were going to be pitted against each other and that only one of them could survive by the end, but the way that it came about was just really unimpressive for me. It seemed very contrived and kind of forced, so it just didn't seem likely that in a conclave someone would be like, you know what? It's not common for someone to have two apprentices, so how about one of them dies? And then the leader is like, yeah, why not? So that just seemed way too plot driven for me. It just didn't come about in a convincing way, so I think that was my problem with it. And since it was so nonchalant, I had a feeling that there was going to be a way for them to just get out of it. So I didn't expect them to get out of it the way that they did. I did not expect Scythe Faraday to self-glean himself, so when that came up in the story, I was really surprised. Then I had a feeling that it wasn't true, so I expected that he probably would come back, because it did make sense for Rowan and Citra to be split up, and it would have added a lot more to the story, so I do understand why he had to disappear for a while. I really did like that Citra started investigating it right away, and that she started looking through the Thunderhead, trying to find information about it, and did a lot of research on her own. She was very methodical. I enjoyed that, especially going into the back brain of the Thunderhead as well, and looking into that. Earlier when I had heard other reviews of this book that I thought the Thunderhead was going to be one of the antagonists, so I was really surprised when that wasn't the case. But I really enjoyed when Citra was deadish and she had that conversation with the Thunderhead. I think that was one of my favorite parts of the story, just the way that it was written. I don't know, it was a lot more engaging than pretty much anything else. That and, of course, the journal entries were my favorite parts of the book, so I just wanted to add that as a praise in there. And then I was not expecting Scythe Goddard to die in this book. I, for some reason, thought he was going to be one of the main antagonists throughout the entire trilogy, so I was surprised that that happened so soon. I'm really intrigued to see what the main issues are going to be like in the Thunderhead. I haven't heard any reviews or even read the back of that one yet. I just picked it up and I'm going to continue reading anyway. But when it came to Goddard, I really liked Rowan's story with him. Not that I liked it. I enjoyed reading Rowan's training with Scythe Goddard and the way that he rationalizes all of his decisions. At first I thought that I really liked Rowan's story a lot better than I did Citra's. I think that his internal tug of war that he had going on, wanting to please Scythe Goddard and doing all of the awful things that he had to do with his training versus trying to be the person who he was at the beginning of the story. I really liked watching his internal struggle. I thought that that was really intriguing. And I feel like Citra's story could have been a bit better. The part where she was wrongly accused was really interesting. The rest of her adventure, like once Scythe Curie finds her, it was all just way too simple. She barely ran into any issues, she got there no problem, and then it's just fine after that. So that was a little weird to me that they're just like, oh yeah, we'll just let her off, I guess, because she slipped through our fingers, so we'll just see her at the Winter Conclave when this is all over, and then one of them will die. So yeah, that was way too easily smoothed over. I feel like that's probably another thing there where the stakes were just lowered and kind of dropped for me, but here we are. I think the most moving part of this book was when Volta died after he had gleaned that room of all of those children and watching his anguish. I think that was morbidly one of my favorite parts of the book. I was also surprised, yet not surprised, when Rowan decided to just glean the rest of them after the incident with Volta. That was the action that I needed in this book, I think. I'm happy that Goddard met the demise that he did. I'm very surprised at how easily Rowan has so far gotten away with that, and I also think that it was really demonstrative of the morally grey character that he has become throughout the book. He essentially throws his entire future away to stop Scythe Goddard and his movement and what they're doing. I also think another moment where Rowan really demonstrated how morally grey he's become is when he blackmailed Xenocrates as well to basically get away with murder of Goddard. He did exactly what Goddard did as well, so I'm hoping that this is Rowan towing the line in between both of those and moving forward into the next book. I'm really excited to see where his character goes and what he's doing, because it sounds like he's going to be a vigilante Scythe and go around and kill all the evil Scythes, so I'm excited to see that. And then when it comes to the very end of the book, I liked the end. I know, it's probably cheesy and exactly to be expected, but that's fine. I enjoyed it. I like a cheerful ending. I like it when the good guys get away in the end. That's fine with me. As much as I do talk about liking high stakes and those emotional endings, I am also not going to complain about the ending of this book. I thought it was really clever that Citra punched Rowan in the mouth using her ring, granting him immunity for a year. And I like that she had everything planned the way that she did so that he could grab the knives and get away, and that he's running away with Scythe Faraday, so now they're both incognito, I guess. I find it odd that Scythe Faraday would be in on this, so I'm really intrigued to see what their relationship is going to be like in the next book. I know people did have some complaints about the trial at the end, how gleaning one of their family members should have been like a permanent gleaning instead of just rendering them deadish, but I didn't have a problem with that. It seemed like a perfectly to be expected test. But yeah, all in all, I did like the book. I am going to continue reading the series. I just wasn't blown away. Hopefully things will continue to escalate and the intrigue will build and I'll get more of that character development that I really want. That's everything that I have to say about Scythe. So if you have read the book and you want to talk about spoilers, if you hate what I said, if you agree with what I said, let me know in the comment section down below. I do request though that if you are going to post about spoilers, you do say spoilers and then do a bunch of spaces so that anyone who hasn't read it isn't going to be spoiled for the book. But thank you so much for tuning in. I appreciate you and have a great day. Bye!